Welcome to the Civic Pulse. Civic means society, and the Civic Pulse looks at what's going on between our families, our neighbors, and our government. I'm Dr. Dilara Sayeed, and I'm honored to serve as the host of the Civic Pulse podcast. Each month, we connect with diverse influencers, changemakers, and leaders. These are the conversations at the intersections across America. Let's go. Today, I'm excited to welcome Imam Ubaydullah Evans. He is a teacher of Islamic studies, a frequent lecturer, and a graduate of Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt. Imam Ubaydullah accepted Islam while he was in high school, and upon becoming Muslim, he began studying some of the foundational books of Islam under the private tutelage of local scholars and scholars across the world. Today, he is known across our nation and across our world as a leader, as a scholar of all faiths, and as a strong American Muslim. Welcome, Imam Ubaydullah.
Thank you. Thank you for a very generous introduction. It's always difficult to hear someone read your accolades, your achievements, and you think to yourself, am I living up to those things? But I do appreciate your inviting me to be a part of the Civic Pulse podcast, and I'm excited about this conversation today.
Yeah, well, let's get right into it. June actually has not just the beginning of summer, but many things happening across our nation, across the world. In America, we are commemorating Juneteenth within the next week and a half. This is something that is really critical. It recently became a federal holiday. And I wanted to ask you, as a proud American, as an African American, knowing that our roots really in our faith and in this nation are through the indigenous communities and the enslaved Africans that were brought here, what does Juneteenth mean to you? What should it mean to all of us?
Juneteenth, for me, entails this recognition that while America is founded upon very honorable ideals, it takes people of conscience, it takes people of faith, it takes people of civic mindedness to ensure that America realizes the promise of its ideals. The enslavement of Africans is in many ways the original sin of this nation. And if people had been content to allow this to persist, if people had viewed this as a status quo that could not be altered, if people had viewed this as too deeply intertwined with global economics, global commerce to do anything about it, we might not have a holiday like Juneteenth. But the fact of the matter is that you had people of conscience, people of faith that said this does not represent what America is supposed to be about. And they worked and they fought and they were willing to die for the issue of the liberation of people of African descent. And of course, Juneteenth represents, I guess, the final end of slavery in the United States. And I just think that it is a very potent reminder for those of us who appreciate the freedoms of this country, appreciate the opportunities that we found in this country, that this is a project. This is a work in progress. America cannot be held up as a place that ideals are completely realized, but rather a place that those ideals must be, we must work to bring them to their fullness and to see their fruition. And we're still doing that in many ways. But Juneteenth represents, an instance in which those things, happened.
Yeah. It's a moment of reflection. It's a moment in time for us to think what has been done through the struggle of many good people and what else has to continue to be done and to happen and achieve through the ongoing struggle of good people. And we're talking about that in the context of being American, and I appreciate your saying earlier that you're a proud American, and that patriotism is loving one's nation enough to want it to be even better,
Of
enough
course,
to want it to be good for everyone in this nation. And
of
I
course,
remember as an 8th grade US history teacher, we also often asked, what is a patriot, as we learned US history? And that is the definition my students would come up with, that a patriot loves his nation or her nation enough to want it to be better.
of
And
course.
we want this for our world too, as global citizens. And when we of course, look across our nation, we have more work to do and we will continue to do it. But when we look across the world right now, sometimes it almost feels like we're going backwards in
Mhm,
terms of equity and in terms of just common humanity of
mhm,
each other and recognizing it. Right now, Sudan and Palestine, right?
mhm,
Two places where some of the greatest humanitarian crises of our lifetimes are happening.
mhm,
And what I think about them right now is of all the things that we have watched happen in these two spaces,
mm,
starvation
mm,
in the year 2025,
mm,
the inhumanity of using starvation as a weapon
mhm,
seems to be what's happening.
mhm.
What does that make you think about what is our responsibility and what is the world's responsibility?
To me, it represents the total failure of the global order, to think, and going back to your first question about Juneteenth, you know, Juneteenth is a reminder that America is capable of being complicit or, in fact, perpetrating great evil. And I think that sometimes, we act as though we're incapable of seeing that. We're incapable of seeing that we can get it grossly wrong. We can be grossly mistaken. And the history of enslavement in this country and the history of Juneteenth is an evidence of that. I think these two humanitarian crises that you mentioned is another case. Well, one is an explicit case of, I think, America getting this grossly wrong. And the other is just a failure of the entire global order, that even now, where there's greater amity, greater friendship, greater communication, greater, borders are more open, among nations, we still can have a humanitarian crisis like this,
Mm,
and no one is
mm.
willing to make the kind of intervention necessary to really bring an end to this. And I think we as religious people should be deeply dissatisfied with what is happening in the name of politics, power, land acquisition.
I think again, how can we be humane in an often inhumane world?
Mhm,
And I go to starvation because I think that is the basic need, is sustenance, is
mhm,
food. And
mhm,
in this world, we are not in short supply of food. We have enough
mhm,
for our 7 billion humans.
mhm,
And yet, it is the hoarding, it is the not seeing each other as human that
mhm,
is the cause of what's happening right now in Palestine and Sudan. And as you said, almost completely because of politics, power, greed, and land acquisition. June is also Men's Mental Health Month.
mm.
And we've seen unfold in our nation, the word manosphere, like I'd never heard of
Yeah.
manosphere until this election, right? Um, just, today I woke up, we read about the Austrian gunman, 21-year-old young man who killed 9 people in
Mm,
Austria,
mm.
right? At a school again, as we've seen in our nation, now seeing it in another nation around the world. Like, what's happening? What do you think are some of the causes of this?
I think that this is a place that we need to focus our attention. It's very easy to look at the scientific advancements, the technological advancements, there have even been political advancements
Yeah.
in the world today, and just fall into this, I think, trap of believing that the present is always better than that which preceded it. It's
Mm,
always better than that which came before it. Rather, I think when you look at some of these very troubling statistics, it suggests that while all of us love the internet and social media, and we love, ease of transportation, and we love ease of communication, and we love ease of access when it comes to food, something about the way we live is having a deleterious effect
mm,
on the mental health of people. Something about the way we live is promoting a kind of unwellness, a kind of unhealthiness. And I think it's showing up in these inexplicable, rash acts of violence, in this very self serving, other obliterating culture that has somehow attached itself to masculinity. This is all very strange. I think that these are, I think that yes, there are multiple causes. We could probably spend the next hour, talking about these things, but I think what's lacking is a kind of balance. Some of this is that a lot of young men don't feel any um, they don't feel like there's any place that they can express, traditionally masculine ideals like protectiveness, like, being providers, being protectors, being leaders, being those who secure their families, their communities, etc., in a healthy way. And I think that they're practicing those ideals in a very perverse
mm.
and degraded way. And this is, I think, why we see all of this violence, and it's quite troubling.
Yeah. And there are moments in time, and even now, when we go to the extreme of what when so the traditional sense of protectiveness becomes, I am the man who protects, right? But in our effort to find balance,
Mhm,
and become partners in that, have
mhm,
we almost become a place where then in the world men feel like they can't protect, they don't have the right to protect. So like, instead of a I am the only protector, to we are a society and a family of protectors of each other, right? Men and women protectors of each other in different ways. Have we then made it to like, now the man's not a protector of anything?
I think that we overestimate the ability to kind of reset parts of our psychological inheritance in, say, 40 years, when men have probably been doing something and performing certain societal and familial roles since time immemorial. And so if society, shifts very quickly and very radically, and it leads to men feeling displaced, meaning
Mm,
the Atlantic ran an article about 7 years ago called The End of Men. And the basic thesis of the article was that with a change in the mode of economic production, meaning we don't have as much manual labor, and women entering the workforce, demanding equal pay for equal work, and the nature of the work being work that women can exceed and excel men in, men have been kind of grappling with this displacement. What do I do? What what what's my contribution? What makes me special? What's
mm,
my role in my family, in my society? And many of them
mm,
have turned to very violent forms of pornography, very violent forms of entertainment and sport, very perverse forms of just violence, quite frankly, to feel the void that was produced by some of that displacement.
mm, absolutely. I know, so I know this will continue, and so much more information will come out about this gunman and the next gunman and the last gunman, and then the challenges, and I think again, access to weapons of destruction at a rate that we have been having,
Mhm,
and even when we talk about self injury, uh, we know the rates are high in women of self injury, but the rates of suicide, because men use guns versus other types of
mhm,
self-injuring methods, um, it's just like everything just seems to be like we need to take care of men's health, um,
Mhm.
because as
Mhm.
a society, we haven't done enough of that. And again, that's not to say we don't need to take care of women's health. We need to do that as well. And as a
Mhm.
world society, we haven't done enough of that. So
Yeah, I mean, well, at
I'm
the
just,
very least, I think that um, women have been allowed, well, some women have been allowed to, to express vulnerability. Men, on the other hand, are very uncomfortable with even admitting that I feel displaced. I am depressed. I feel despondent. I feel frustrated. I feel overlooked. I feel invalidated, etc. And I think just being able to identify with some of that negative emotion will maybe give us the ability to process it more healthily. Yeah.
yeah, it goes back to humankind, right? That every human being needs to be seen as a human being, because certainly nothing is easy. When you're a woman, as we talk about often as women, and what we're finding is so much is hard for men as
Yeah.
well right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you know, this month in America, we are also have Pride Month
Mhm.
for the LGBTQI community.
Mhm.
And as a Muslim, as an imam, a person of faith and scholarship, we want to help people understand it. And I think you're a perfect person to ask. We work, we're allies with diverse communities.
Mhm.
How does a Muslim engage in an LGBTQI world?
Well, I think it's important to affirm that we respect all people because of our shared humanity. The Quran says, لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي Adam, that truly we have ennobled all of the children of Adam. And in our worldview, that respect is not negated by disagreement. That respect is not negated by disagreement. In fact, I would go as far as to say that tolerance and even appreciation of difference only begins after we acknowledge difference. And I think that this has always been a part of our worldview. If I'm being fair, I mean, I have to be fair to the Muslim community here. The Muslims have always, historically, produced societies in which difference could be accommodated. You have lots of religious minorities that they flourished under Muslim rule. And some of
Mhm.
them had moral codes that differed starkly from Muslim moral codes. There was a community called the Zoroastrian community, and they practiced, incestuous marriage, which was something that was quite strange to Muslim communities. But if they practiced that form of marriage within their own communities, Muslim scholars would leave them undisturbed about their own kind of worldview and way of life. So we've always been capable of producing, a culture of tolerance. I don't know that the West, and by the West, I'm thinking Western Europe and by extension America, I don't know that they've always proven as capable of
Mm,
producing that culture of pluralism, like true pluralism. And so I think in those communities, you're given this choice of like complete acceptance. And if you don't completely accept me, then that means you want to destroy me. And for
mm,
us, it's like, wait, did he just say that? That's not my worldview. My worldview is one in which I can completely respect you, esteem you as a neighbor, esteem you as a colleague, and affirm your right to your way of life, while saying that in my way of life, something like that is not morally acceptable. In my
mm,
way of life. Now, in the absence of some uh criterion that makes me societally wrong and you societally right, or vice versa, we have to learn to live with one another and to
mhm.
tolerate one another.
Yeah. And I think about my being a teacher in the university level, and at no time would I ever allow bullying,
Mhm,
otherizing,
mhm,
or a lower level of an education for anyone in my classroom,
mhm.
regardless of their faith, their creed,
Or
their
lack
way of
thereof.
life,
Mhm,
anything, right? I think
mhm,
about doctors who treat patients,
mhm.
regardless of who that patient is and walks
Of
into
course.
that office or the hospital. And
Mhm,
so in so many ways, when we see each other as human, and if there's a need that we serve it for all human beings. If there's something that we do it for all human beings without
mhm.
compromising my own value system,
No.
without compromising or having to shift or change something that I believe in, right? And when people say, yeah, well, like, I mean, but what if someone next to you was a Nazi or a murderer or anything? But we're not talking about someone who's not seeing someone else as human, because that's the core of Nazism. That's
Yeah.
the core of someone who is a serial killer. They're not seeing someone else as a human being. When we see each other as the foundation of I am human, you are human, I have a right to
Mhm.
basic needs, you have a right to basic needs, I have a right to thrive, you have a right to thrive. And then the differences at that level should not be what drive us to hate each other or to diminish each other. And so I think that's what we're saying. And our faith, all our faiths agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be, a display of one's faith
Mm,
that I can treat with respect somebody that I disagree with strongly.
mhm.
That's like, even, I'll say this, someone said the pluralism that we esteem, in America is not a real pluralism because, yes, we may have different externalities, but we all think the same. As long as we all think the same. Yeah, we have different skin colors and different ways we express love differently and different ideas about romantic partnerships and stuff like that. But we all think the same, right? And I think that real tolerance is when I can respect a person who thinks differently than I do.
Yeah,
You don't believe as I do, and I still respect you. And I
yeah.
still, in fact, want to draw nearer to God through treating you well. That's Islam. But
Love that.
I'm not willing to compromise the fact that I don't agree with that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't think that that is correct. But that
yeah,
doesn't mean that, in fact, that's all the more reason that I should be good to you, that I should
yeah,
be, a good neighbor and a good colleague, and
yeah.
a good coworker and a good classmate, because
Yeah.
we, in
And
fact, don't agree.
And so much of the crises in our nation, certainly, and probably across the world, is that, right? Like the echo chambers we all seem to live in. And if you, okay, I'm okay with you not looking like me, but yeah, you got to think like me, you got to believe like me. And
Mhm.
you're saying, get just stop thinking that way. It's not going to happen. And I think again to our faith's Quran, where it says, we have created you, in different tribes and nations so that
No
you
one.
may know one another. And so God has already told us in scripture, in every scripture, whether it's the Bible, the gospel, the Quran, the Torah, that he has created us differently. And actually, it's a challenge to us to know each other. He didn't say become each other. He didn't say, change into each other. He said, so you may know one another.
That for me is where, Muslims of faith, Muslims of conscience, this is where I challenge them. I said, look, no matter what you say, you have to acknowledge that all of the diversity that exists in the world is the diversity that God put into it.
Yeah.
So if you really are frustrated by it, whose will are you frustrated with? If God didn't want these people to exist, they wouldn't exist. But they do
Yeah.
exist. You can either accept the challenge of holding your moral line and treating them well and being good to people, or you fail that test. But don't be frustrated by the diversity that God put into the world. God put that diversity into the world.
This has been such a powerful conversation. And we get to like, what's the ask? Like, what do we need to do right now? If you could name 2 things that everybody listening to this should go and do to make it a better world through the crises, the fire, through everything happening right now, what do we need to do today? What do I gotta do?
wallahi,
I'm gonna say goodbye to you, I'm
no,
gonna
no,
say
no,
salam to
wallahi,
you, I'm gonna
wallahi,
thank you, and then what do I need to do?
wallahi, I wish I knew definitively, but I'll say two things. One, I really think that faith, for me, faith is foundational as a public good. Not, I'm not talking about a salvific good that you're going to go to heaven. As
Mm,
a public good, you have to find some means of valuing people beyond the merely utilitarian. There has to be
mm,
some meaning, you have to find some means of assessing why all of this is important and why certain things are unacceptable. I mean, like what?
mm,
If we're just seeing this through the lens of, consumer capitalism, these are profits, these are losses, and that's your worldview. I just, I don't think that, like, I think that that worldview is not adequate to get us
mm,
out of the morass that we're in. I think we're very
mm,
much in need of a spiritual awakening as a species. I'm not talking about like
mm,
as a species, I think that we have to really think deeply about where we've gone astray in terms of our view of the world.
mm,
And the second thing I would say is, going out and intentionally making yourself uncomfortable through connecting with people that you don't normally connect with. It could be people that have a different socioeconomic status. It could
mm,
be people from a different religious community. It could be people that have a different lifestyle in terms of, who they love and how they love. It could be, people whose politics are different than yours. Going out and listening to them and sitting with them, not because you agree with them and not because you have any misgiving about we're going to all eventually agree. But when I disagree with you
mm.
and when I express my disagreement with you, I want to stay fully in touch with your humanity,
Yeah,
right? I don't
yeah,
want to demonize you. I don't want to otherize you. I want to disagree with you like I would disagree with a human with whom I
yeah,
disagree. And
yeah,
that's one of the secrets of the Quran. People who don't get to read the Quran very closely, whenever Allah is talking about a group with whom Muslims disagree, He always recommends that the people come together.
yeah,
Right? Let us come
yeah,
together. Let
yeah,
us be in proximity to each other, getting out of these echo chambers that allow us to just erase each other's humanity.
yeah,
And I think that just leads to constant collision, ideologically, politically, philosophically, religiously, and I think this is having an adverse effect on our
yeah,
experience of each other in the world.
yeah. I really appreciate this. Thank you for your time, and I hear you. What you're asking us to do is see each other in the way that our Creator created each of us.
Mhm.
He created every single human being, every single creature with love, with an intentionality, and with the potential. And
Uh,
if we could see that in each other, then we can see something else.
yeah,
You know,
no,
I gotta tell you, I did just get
about that.
a honorary doctorate in divinity, and ministry from the Catholic
Oh,
Theological Union.
of
So,
course, of
I'm
course,
trying to
yeah.
hold my own with you, someone like you,
Oh, no,
so
no, of course.
learned
I
and
mean,
such a scholar.
you're over there with Shamar Hemphill, Professor Scott Alexander, some of the best to ever do it.
Yeah,
Some of the
and
best to
that's
do it.
yeah, the CTU and the CTS, both amazing institutions, on the south side of Chicago near Hyde Park. And then, of course, like all our faith institutions are trying to teach us all the same thing. I even think of Pope Francis, who we lost, and the new Pope Leo. Pope
Yeah.
Francis was one of the first to call for a ceasefire. His
Mm,
last sermon in Easter was to speak of Sudan and Gaza and all of the places on
mhm,
earth that
mhm,
needed our prayer. And
mhm,
Pope Leo's first prayer included Gaza and included
mhm,
again all of the places on earth that needed
mhm,
our help and our support. Faith leaders, good leaders of all
mhm,
backgrounds,
mhm.
see creation, and
Of
human
course.
beings need to see each other as creation.
I mean, like I said, man, I mean, when I think about, Pope Leo, Pope Francis before him, and just how on the point of serving the marginalized, the
Mhm,
disenfranchised, um, the migrants, they've been unswerving. They've been
mhm,
consistent. They've been steady. And every time I see that, I say, we as an American society are in. We really need to take some time out to think about who we are and what we are,
mhm.
because I would take great delight in saying I live in a Christian nation. I'm a Muslim. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. But to live in a place that really wants to give life to the ethic of Jesus Christ as depicted in the Gospels, that would be a very comfortable place for me to practice my Islam. I think my conscience would be, assuaged by my nation adopting that ethical stance.
Yeah,
The problem is that I don't think that we are, although there are overtures to Christianity and to the Bible and to the gospel, but and the same thing is true in Muslim societies. Lots of
yeah,
overtures to the Quran and the Sunnah, but I think we have to work to make it more real.
yeah.
To work to make it more
May
real.
we all walk in civic society the way that the great faith leaders walked in civic society, with love and humility, the way Jesus walked, the way Muhammad walked, the way Abraham walked, with love for all, with wanting the best for all.
Yeah.
Imam Ubaydullah, this has been so spiritually enlightening, and comforting to have
Mm.
this conversation. You inspire us to keep going. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you
everyone
for
that
having me.
you support.
This really was enjoyable. I took this morning thinking, this is, Dr. Dilara. She does a lot for the community. Let me pitch in and do something. And it turned out to be something that I really, really learned a lot from, and I appreciate the time that we've spent in conversation.
Thank you. The Civic Pulse podcast is produced by Usama Rezi and Subhan Ashrafi and the Civic Pulse team. And thank you, Imam Ubaydullah, for being our guest and our teacher today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having, I've enjoyed it immensely.
Assalamu alaikum. May
Wa
God's peace be
alaikum
with you all.
salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.